Hey, learner. So imagine for a second that you just bought, the absolute pinnacle of consumer technology,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
right? Let's say a major tech company
Hmm.
launches millions of these next generation, incredibly advanced smartphones. They're sleek, they're lightning fast, they are the undeniable future.
Sounds great.
It does, right. But there is one rather massive oversight. The company, um, they forgot to manufacture the charging cables.
Oh, wow. That's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You are holding this incredible piece of hardware in your hands. But the moment that battery icon turns red, you realize you have absolutely no idea where or how you're supposed to plug it in.
Right, which turns a brilliant piece of engineering into, a very heavy, very expensive paperweight.
Exactly.
And I think the sheer anxiety of that situation, it really comes from the disconnect between having the technology and just completely lacking the ecosystem required to actually support it.
And that is exactly what it feels like when you look at the incredibly messy, surprisingly complex, and honestly deeply paradoxical reality of America's electric vehicle charging network right now, as we sit here in mid-2026.
It really is a wild landscape out there.
It is. So today's deep dive is tailored specifically to cut through the overwhelming noise surrounding this whole transition. We are digging into a stack of sources that tell a pretty wild story. We've got federal tracking data from the Government Accountability Office, dense market intelligence reports from Parent Atlas Public Policy, plus some genuinely paradigm-shifting breaking news involving Uber and, of all things, the U.S. military.
Yeah, the military angle is fascinating, but our mission for this deep dive is really to figure out the reality on the ground. We are looking at exactly who is building this infrastructure, why the initial massive push seems to have hit a concrete wall in certain regions, and how private companies are essentially, looking at the old grid blueprints, tearing them up, and completely rewriting the rules of energy distribution from scratch.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we have to start by looking at the absolute highest level, the grand vision. A few years ago, the federal government made this massive promise to build a seamless, top-down, nationwide network of EV chargers, so no one would ever have to worry about running out of battery.
Right, the ultimate safety net.
But when you look at the actual data we have for 2025 and 2026, well, that top-down approach is struggling in a major way.
It really is. The data paints a very clear picture of that struggle. Let's look at the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which is widely known as NEV.
Right.
This was a $4.4 billion federal initiative specifically designed to get a nationwide network of fast chargers off the ground. But if you pull the reporting from early 2025, states had collectively spent only 2% of those available funds.
2%.
Yeah, 2%. That equates to just $94 million out of $4.4 billion.
2% is essentially a rounding error.
It really is.
And it's not just a paper delay, right? Because that bottleneck translates directly into the physical world. By April of 2025, under a much broader $7.5 billion U.S. infrastructure program, the Government Accountability Office found that less than 400 total ports were operating. And that's across a mere 68 stations nationwide.
Yes, 68 stations is practically nothing on a national scale. And that physical rollout was taking place against an increasingly volatile policy backdrop. The timeline of events really impacted the momentum here.
How so?
Well, the Biden administration faced significant public and political criticism over that initial slow pace. Then, in early 2025, the incoming Trump administration enacted a 7-month freeze on all NEV funding to conduct a review of the program.
So they just hit the pause button completely.
Completely. And that pause eventually turned into a reduction.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. By February 2026, a budget resolution signed by President Trump cut $500 million from the NEV program entirely. That move left only $300 million authorized for EV charger installation for the year 2026. Simultaneously, the broader federal EV tax credits ended, and government-owned EV chargers that were not deemed explicitly mission-critical were ordered to be disconnected.
Okay, I am looking at this timeline, and I have to push back a little here because the math doesn't quite add up for me.
Sure.
Even before we get to the political shifts, the 7-month freezes and the budget cuts of 2025 and 2026, billions of dollars were already sitting there. The Atlas Public Policy Report shows that by early 2025, states had already obligated over $500 million. They had awarded actual contracts for nearly 4,000 fast chargers.
Yes, on paper.
Right, but why did the physical pouring of concrete and laying of wire grind to such a halt before the political climate even changed? Is this just typical bureaucratic red tape, or is there something fundamentally broken about how we try to build public infrastructure?
Well, it's a great question. The underlying issue is a profound lack of institutional muscle memory. Consider who was tasked with building this network. State Departments of Transportation.
Right.
These are agencies that are historically phenomenal at paving asphalt, building massive bridges, and managing highway traffic. But suddenly, they were handed a mandate to run complex electrical engineering and EV charging programs.
Oh, I see.
They had zero precedent for this. They had to navigate Byzantine state procurement rules for technology they barely understood.
So they were essentially learning to fly the plane while they were already in the air.
Exactly. And the turbulence was severe. A massive hurdle that is often overlooked is utility interconnection. You don't just plug a 250 kilowatt fast charger into a city block like a toaster.
I would assume not.
Right. State agencies had to negotiate with regional utility monopolies, wait for them to upgrade neighborhood transformers that might be, 50 years old, and coordinate the tearing up of active commercial real estate at gas stations and truck stops to lay heavy-duty conduit.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. Those utility interconnection timelines alone can take months or even years.
So the friction was deeply operational. It was baked into the physical reality of the power grid, long before the budget cuts even hit.
Precisely.
And that friction has boiled over into actual legal battles now. The sources note that 16 states are currently suing the Department of Transportation over withheld funds.
Which brings us to a really fascinating divergence in the data. If your only source of information was the headlines about frozen public funding, canceled government projects, and multi-state lawsuits, you would logically conclude that the entire transition to electric vehicles in the U.S. is completely dead.
And I think that is the most incredible plot twist in this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
Because the data shows the exact opposite is happening.
Completely the opposite. The private market is entirely defying the public narrative.
To put it in perspective, it feels like the government announced they were going to build this massive centralized mainframe computer to run the country's EV network. But while the state agencies were spending 2 years arguing over the schematics and waiting for transformer upgrades, private companies simply realized it was faster and more profitable to just go out and build a decentralized, highly efficient network of personal computers on their own.
That is a highly accurate way to frame the reality we see in the Perrin Q1 2026 and full year 2025 reports. The deployment numbers are absolutely staggering.
Let's hear them.
2025 was a record-breaking year for U.S. fast-charging infrastructure. Private operators deployed over 18,000 new DC fast-charging ports.
Wow.
Yeah, that represents a 30% year-over-year increase.
And crucially, drivers are actually using them. This isn't just a case of build it and then they might come.
Right.
The Perrin report shows that public fast charging demand hit a record 141 million individual sessions in 2025. That is another 30% jump. The cars are on the road and they are hungry for power.
And here's the statistic that completely reframes our understanding of the infrastructure landscape. Of all those 18,000 new ports deployed in 2025, the NEVI-funded ports, the ones driven by that massive federal initiative, they accounted for only about 3%.
I really want you to let that sink in for a second. 3%. That means 97% of the entire network expansion happening right now is taking place entirely outside of the federal program.
Yeah.
The government has essentially lost control of the infrastructure grid to private corporations.
Well, the private sector saw the demand and just refused to wait for public subsidies. They aren't speculating on future trends. They are deploying massive amounts of capital right now because the utilization is there.
The gold rush.
It is. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the market's maturity. Initially, it was a scale-driven race. Companies were just trying to plant a flag on a map to say they existed. Now it is a race defined entirely by asset efficiency and brutal execution.
Let's talk about the players executing on that level, because the leaderboard is definitely shifting. For years, Tesla was the only name that mattered. They are still the heavyweight champion, right? I mean, the data shows they deployed 880 new ports just in the first quarter of 2026 alone.
Yes, Tesla still maintains a commanding lead. They operate about 51% of all DC fast-charging ports nationwide.
Okay.
However, their grip on the growth of the market is loosening. Their share of new deployments has dropped to around 37%.
It's interesting.
And that vacuum is being filled by a massive surge from non-Tesla networks. Companies like Iona, Ready, ChargePoint, and EVgo are aggressively rolling out sites. We're even seeing retail giants like Walmart jumping straight into the top 10 for new infrastructure deployments.
That shift from public to private entirely changes the physical reality of what you experience when you pull over to charge your car. Knowing who is building the network directly dictates how they're building it. The anatomy of the modern charging station has completely mutated between 2025 and 2026.
Mutated is a good word for it. They are scaling up dramatically. Historically, a non-Tesla station might have been a single, lonely charger tucked behind a diner.
Right. Usually broken.
Exactly. But now, Tesla averages 12.2 ports per individual station, and the non-Tesla networks are rapidly catching up, growing their average to 4.6 ports per station, which is a 31% increase year over year.
But it's not just the size of the stations, it's the sheer power they are pushing. The parent data highlights that 55% of all new non-Tesla deployments are high-power chargers, meaning they are pushing 250 kilowatts or more. Let's break down the physical mechanism of that,
Yeah.
because 250 kilowatts is an abstract number to a lot of people.
Sure. So at 250 kilowatts, assuming the vehicle's battery chemistry can accept that flow rate, you are looking at delivering roughly 100 miles of driving range in under 10 minutes.
That is approaching gas station speeds.
It really is. The underlying logic here is future-proofing. Infrastructure is an incredibly high capital expenditure game. These private operators know that vehicle battery technology is going to advance rapidly over the next 5 years.
So they want to be ready.
Right, they are installing the heavy-duty, high-capacity electrical hardware today so they don't have to rip up the concrete and replace the machines tomorrow when cars inevitably demand more juice.
I want to dive into a specific friction point that I imagine terrifies anyone buying an EV right now. With all these different non-Tesla companies building networks, it feels like we were heading for a VHS versus Betamax nightmare. You know, the scenario where I drive up to a new ultra-fast 250 kilowatt charger and my car physically does not fit the plug.
Yes. The connector standard format war has been a defining conflict in the industry. Tesla's proprietary connector, which they rebranded as the North American Charging Standard, or NACS, is definitely gaining ground.
Okay.
It accounts for 18% of all new non-Tesla ports deployed. However, the traditional Combined Charging System Standard, CCS, still heavily dominates the non-Tesla landscape at about 75%.
So the reality for the driver is that you are probably going to have an adapter sitting in your glove box for at least a few more years while the hardware catches up to the industry agreements.
That is the practical reality, yes. But what is perhaps more surprising is the financial reality at the plug. You might assume that with private companies dominating the deployment and the government taking a step back, operators would start price gouging drivers.
I absolutely would assume that.
But they aren't. The average price has remained incredibly stable at 53 cents per kilowatt hour nationwide.
That is fascinating. If pricing is flat across the board and stations are universally getting bigger and faster, what is the actual battlefield? How do these private companies differentiate themselves if they can't undercut each other on cost? Are we finally past the dark ages of range anxiety where you just pray the single charger at the rest stop is actually turned on?
Mostly, yes. In 2026, the battlefield is entirely about reliability and uptime. A broken charger with a black screen is a stranded asset. It generates zero revenue while still depreciating.
Makes sense.
So operators are fighting tooth and nail to ensure their stations work flawlessly on the first try. And the data indicates a massive improvement. The Perrin Reliability Index, which aggregates data from over 95% of all DC fast charging sessions, is currently hitting a 93.5% national average for uptime.
Okay, and they need that reliability to fight the new bottleneck, which is congestion. If the chargers aren't broken anymore, the problem becomes waiting in line behind 5 other cars.
Exactly.
The utilization map in the Perrin report shows a really stark divide. You have major metro areas like Washington, D.C. and California seeing massive utilization rates, over 30%, which directly translates to drivers sitting in queues. But then you look at a state like Alaska, and it's practically a ghost town with under 3% utilization.
This perfectly illustrates why the private sector model is outperforming the federal mandate. A government program is often politically obligated to distribute funds evenly across a map, building chargers in ultra-low usage areas to ensure universal coverage. But private capital doesn't care about a perfectly even map. They are dropping high-density, multi-port hubs specifically into the high-congestion markets where utilization, and therefore profit, is basically guaranteed.
That makes perfect sense for consumer vehicles. But if congestion in places like Los Angeles or San Francisco is the new bottleneck, how do you prevent high-volume commercial users from completely clogging the public network? We are seeing entirely new heavyweight players enter the chat, and they are completely redefining what we even consider to be infrastructure.
Yes, this is the pivot point where EV charging shifts from being a consumer convenience into an industrial-scale logistics problem.
Let's unpack the Uber announcement. They are investing over $100 million into DC fast-charging hubs, but this capital isn't for you or me to use on a road trip. It is specifically targeted at robotaxis, autonomous vehicles operating in priority cities like Los Angeles, Dallas, and San Francisco.
The mechanism behind how Uber is deploying this capital is what makes it revolutionary. They are signing what they call utilization guarantee agreements with charging network operators like EVgo.
Can you break down the financial engineering of that? Because it sounds like Uber is essentially playing the role of a bank.
In a way, they are acting as the underwriter. Building a dedicated fast-charging hub requires massive upfront capital expenditure. A company like EVgo takes on an enormous risk. They spend millions buying land, upgrading grid connections, and installing hardware.
And if no one shows up,
They go bankrupt. But Uber is stepping in and essentially saying, if you build this hub, we will mathematically guarantee that our autonomous fleets will charge there a specific number of times per month, ensuring your revenue.
wow. It turns a speculative real estate play into something as stable as a municipal bond. The risk just vanishes for the builder.
And for Uber, it solves their core existential threat. A robotaxi is a revenue-generating asset only when the wheels are turning with a passenger inside. If an autonomous vehicle is idling in a queue, waiting for a public charger, or routing 10 miles out of its way to find an available plug, it is bleeding profit.
So the underlying logic is that whoever controls the charging nodes controls the flow of the city. The entire commercial EV race has fundamentally mutated. It's no longer just a software competition about who writes the best self-driving code or a hardware race for the sleekest car. It's an urban infrastructure land grab.
Exactly. Controlling the energy node is the ultimate competitive advantage for a fleet operator.
And while Uber is busy rewriting the infrastructure rules inside urban centers, another company is completely dismantling the rules everywhere else. The breaking news regarding Exos Inc. and the U.S. Air Force blew my mind.
Oh, the deployment of the Exos Charger Hub represents a complete paradigm shift in how we conceptualize heavy-duty power delivery.
I am absolutely fascinated by the mechanics of this device. Exos has built a fully mobile, towable charging unit. It houses massive battery banks ranging from 210 up to 630 kilowatt hours of capacity, with a price tag starting around $158,000. But the true breakthrough is what it doesn't require. It requires zero connection to the local electrical grid. It requires no underground trenching. It requires no municipal permits. The military can literally hook it up to a heavy-duty pickup truck, tow it into an empty field, and immediately start fast-charging a fleet of vehicles.
When you look closely at that capability, you realize it completely bypasses every single bottleneck that strangled the federal NEVI program.
No.
There is no 18-month waiting period for a regional utility to upgrade a transformer.
None.
There are no zoning board approvals or environmental impact studies for tearing up concrete.
It's like a massive military-grade portable power bank. You know the little brick you take to a music festival to keep your phone alive?
Yeah.
It's that, but scaled up to power industrial trucks. And looking at the Exos unit makes me question our entire baseline assumption about commercial EV charging. If we have the technology to drop a 630 kilowatt-hour charger anywhere on the planet tomorrow morning without ever touching the traditional electrical grid, doesn't that make the conventional gas station model completely obsolete for commercial fleets? Why would a logistics company ever buy permanent real estate and wait 2 years to dig trenches?
It's a profound operational question. For commercial and military slates, being tethered to a fixed location is rapidly becoming a liability. Flexibility is the new premium asset. Consider a major package delivery company.
Okay.
Their delivery routes change dynamically based on population shifts, and their power demands surge wildly during the holidays. They cannot afford to rely on a static piece of concrete they poured 3 years ago. By entirely decoupling the charger from the power grid, technologies like the Exos Hub allow energy to become just as mobile and fluid as the vehicles that consume it.
So, bringing this deep dive full circle, we are looking at a landscape defined by an incredible paradox. On one side, the traditional, publicly funded vision of EV infrastructure, that top-down dream of a universally accessible, government-subsidized network, is moving at a crawl. It is bogged down by the sheer complexity of the grid, delayed by a lack of institutional experience, and battered by severe budget cuts.
Yet simultaneously, the actual physical network of chargers spreading across the country is expanding faster than at any point in history.
Driven entirely by a relentless private sector, we have private networks abandoning the slow government rollout to build their own massive hubs, mobile grid-free technologies bypassing red tape entirely, and aggressive corporate investments from giants like Uber underwriting the future of urban power.
And the reason this matters so deeply to you, the listener, is because this rapid privatization impacts the fabric of your daily life. Whether you are actively shopping for a new electric vehicle, waiting to catch an autonomous robotaxi to the airport, or simply paying attention to how the electrical grid in your own city is evolving.
That's
The way energy moves, who distributes it, and who profits from it is being mobilized and privatized at lightning speed.
which leaves us with a pretty intense thought to chew on as we wrap up today. Think back to that opening analogy of the brilliant new smartphone missing its charging cable. We clearly aren't waiting for the government to hand us the cable anymore. Private corporations have stepped in to build their own.
They certainly have.
But if massive commercial fleets, autonomous robotaxi networks, and the military are all building their own highly efficient, mobile or privately guaranteed energy hubs, what happens to the rest of us? Will the public EV grid, the one everyday people rely on to get to work or visit family, eventually devolve into a neglected secondary network? Will average drivers be left fighting over the leftovers at the local strip mall, while the true innovation in energy happens silently, out of sight, behind private corporate gates?